welcome back to Creative Herts, the show dedicated to the creative journey, the creative process, the highs and the lows and everything in between, and dedicated really to the creative community right here in Hertfordshire. So today I've got a real treat for you. I'm joined in the studio by the creative time traveller, Pete Burrows. Pete, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Nice
very well. Lovely to have you in the studio today.
Yeah, brilliant.
Tell me, the creative time traveller, that concept really kind of makes me think. So would you like to talk to us a little bit about that before we go into your fabulous life story?
Yeah, cool. Well, firstly, I'm not Doctor Who, and I don't, I don't actually travel through time. But really, what it sort of came around from was the fact that I've been in the industry for so long, all my life, and I've seen so many different things. So many different, the way that the industry had changed and the attitudes and how people approach design and creativity. That I thought, well, there's something there that is really sort of represents, what I'm about really, and the industry as a whole has gone through so many changes in the time that I've been in it. Started off drawing boards, and then we've gone through these other things. Technology has taken over a lot of things within the creative industry.
So when you talk about the creative industry, what are you actually referring to?
Well, really, I'm talking about things like the whole industry. It's not just art, it's not just design. It's music, it's dance, it's all sorts of things like that. And there's a connection between all this stuff anyway. And I've always sort of believed in that. If you apply yourself creatively to to a particular discipline, I think that sort of limits what you can do. Mm-hmm. And you've got to really sort of think bigger about what creativity is about. And
what is it? What is creativity about for you?
Well, for me, I mean, it's really about how you feel about the idea. It's not. It's something that that isn't really about, oh right, we're coming up with this solution to solve this problem, and that's very important. But because there has to be a purpose for an idea, I think there has to be a there has to be a purpose, there has to be a function, there has to be a form, because at some point
purpose, function, form for an idea.
Yeah.
So that's how you define creativity.
Yeah, and it's the thing is, I believe that it's in everyone. There's no there isn't anyone on the planet that isn't creative, I think. And likewise, I think there's no such thing as actually a bad idea, or a wrong idea. It's just to say that it just doesn't really work for that particular thing. And I think that, the idea thing is actually quite interesting to me, because, if you look at it, an idea is born out of nothing. Mm-hmm. It's almost like the birth of the universe was sort of, it just sort of happened. But what actually triggered that, and it's the same with an idea. An idea can germinate, for months, years, or decades in someone's head, and then eventually it sort of comes out.
I can totally relate to that. The idea is the seed.
Yeah.
Really.
Well, it's actually before that. It's almost like, the preconception of something, and it's. I think there's a reason why, the best design always comes from like a blank sheet of paper or a blank screen, like a tablet or whatever. And because out of nothingness, you sort of create this stuff.
There's something.
Yeah, and I get up every day very early. I get up about sort of 2-3 o'clock with loads of ideas, and it's the most empowering time of the day, really. And certainly it's for me. And there's no phones ringing, there's no emails and stuff like that going off, and you can sort of just sit there and you can think. Mm-hmm. Right? There's a sort of calmness around the world, and everyone's asleep, and you're sort of thinking, well, okay, this is just really sort of almost like relaxing and spiritual, and it's
uninterrupted time to just be, which I think is so rare nowadays, especially from the hours of 8 onwards. It's
and do you know what? I think there's a problem with that, and that is that people don't spend enough time doing nothing, and just thinking. I think people you have to think. I think very, very quickly. I think very strategically, but I also, when I come up with an idea, it isn't just a spontaneous idea. There's been a lot of thought to it, a hell of a lot of thought to it.
Now I have a question for you, because you were talking about creativity being about the idea, the form, and the structure in a way. But what about the execution? Because for me, creativity is more than just the idea. There's lots of people with good ideas, and and ideas. Everybody can have ideas, and ideas are always creative in a sense. There are some very creative ideas, but it's also the execution of those ideas that I think defines the degree of creativity. I mean, I don't know if you agree or disagree, but that's kind of how I'm sitting with it. What do you think?
Well, my opinion on the execution is, to be honest, don't worry about it. Not to the point whereby you're thinking, well, it's got to end up in this form.
Yeah.
The execution of an idea, obviously, if you're working on a particular project, whatever it is, there is a deliverable to that. The idea is going to manifest in something that is relevant for that execution, whatever it is. But during the creative process, you consider the execution, but what you don't do is you don't have it dictate the direction of the idea of what you're trying to, the concepts and what you're trying to develop.
So you're talking about free flowing with the idea rather than.
God, it's very important, very important. The reasoning behind that, certainly for me, is because it opens up different avenues of thought, and you're not worrying about stuff really that you shouldn't really be worrying about at that particular.
Is it easy though? Is it easy to take those worries, that your everyday worries, your financial worries, relationship issues? Is it very easy to just park those aside? Because I guess that's what you're talking about here. If you're able to engage in that creative process in the idea without the worry, then yes, it does flow. But how easy is that to do?
Do you know what? It's a discipline, and you've got to be really. I'm very, very disciplined, and I try not for those things to sort of detract. And you've got to get in the zone at the end of the day. I get up some days and I can't think of anything, and you've got to learn to sort of say, okay, right, today's going to be a bad day, but there may be something that happens that's good further in the day that may actually trigger, something that you can come up with. And it's one of these things whereby I tend to not really worry about it too much, because if you can't do something, why try and force it out? And the problem with a lot of the industry, if you take the design industry, is that we've got we're in a situation whereby we're almost like it's like a battery farm. Some studios are like that, whereby you go into the studio and you're given a brief and you've got to churn this thing out, and you've got X number of hours, otherwise you don't make any profit. And the real problem with ideas and coming up with something that's a bit different and a bit unique and really sort of out there is that takes time to do it. You can't really force that. You can't say, right, okay, you've got an hour to come up with this amazing thing that no one's ever come up with before, and and it's going to be the most amazing thing in the world, otherwise we don't make any money. And that is a very sort of it's almost like a contradiction, because there's two sides to it. There's art and there's commercialism, I think, and it's getting that balance right.
I think it's important to separate or differentiate between the two, because although both involve creativity and creative minds, which I really think that you seem to be, but actually earning money doing it and doing it just for the love are two very, very different vehicles, with different energy, with different restrictions, different challenges in a way. Because if you're just doing it for the love and you've got that space, 2 o'clock till 7 o'clock in the morning, where that nobody's awake, you can't do business. It's not about that. It's about the sheer opening yourself up, allowing the ideas to come and seeing where that takes you. It's a very precious thing to have, because when it's about the money, there are pressures that come with that, isn't there?
Yeah, and you know what? If you look at like really successful people and really successful brands. You know, you take for example Apple. Everyone's heard of them. One of the biggest brands in the world. You know, and as a technology company, they're incredibly unique
and creative.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know, and that is you know their ESP. I call it ESP. Is, you know, emotional selling proposition. You know that they create this stuff that is beautiful, it's functional, it's easy to use. You know, very very lovely design. You know, the sort of people that buy the products love design. You know, and the quality, and they don't really worry about, you know, the sort of functionality, or it's just it's a beautiful thing to use. And it's all about the experience of it, you know. And technology businesses are like that, are very very hard to come by, and I think it's one of these things whereby you can't force that. That comes from the DNA of the business, and more importantly, that it's the DNA of the people that are in the business.
So it's the identity,
yeah,
isn't it?
you know, and so they've got that right balance between, you know, cutting edge technology and award winning design. They've got the best designers in product designers in the world anyway.
So your creative area is in branding?
Well, I mean, it's really sort of weird, right? Because when I was growing up, one of the first, I was 11 years old, one of the first sort of commercial projects I got was a branding project for a design company, ironically. And this was in South London. And I charged them 38 quid, £38, and they loved the work, but they never paid me, and I was really sort of distraught about that. And
they did you out of your £38?
Eh?
How rude!
Yeah,
they did you out of your £38.
Well, you know, I grew up on a council estate in South London, you know, and there was 8 of us living in a 3-bedroom flat, so we had no money.
Wow!
You know, and surrounded by the usual sort of things.
And you had your first creative, real wow moment quite young, didn't you?
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know.
Yeah.
Hold on, before you get into it, I want to backtrack. I think creativity comes from birth almost. Little babies, you can see it. There are creative ways of eating. I mean, I was at a friend's house whose daughter took her food and really ate creatively. She started smearing it all over her body. That's different.
That's rather cool.
Well, I don't know. It was a bit bizarre, but
My
you know,
kids did that.
Did they? All kids squish their food. This was
Yeah.
taking it to a whole
Yeah.
different level. But she was sculpting with it as well. She was building potato towers and everything. It was fascinating to watch, actually.
Yeah.
She was just in that zone that you were talking about. But what I'm referring to is that you had almost a big life-changing moment in your youth that really defines you as a person, I think, now, doesn't it? It's a big part.
God, yeah.
So would you tell us about that? Because that's something that really is quite a story.
Well, you know, I mean, we never had a lot of money at home, and you know, and you know, 5 brothers, and there was a lot of things happening, you know, within the sort of family background that was, you know, a challenge for us all, and we were very sort of, you know, there was very much a sort of family unit. But what happened really was that I was 3 years old and I collapsed, and you know, I was rushed to hospital and I was diagnosed with epilepsy, you know, from 3 years old. So, and it was a case of, well, obviously my parents worrying about that, and initially it was quite a negative thing because, you know, to be honest, I didn't really know what was happening with me until I was about 17, 18. I didn't really have a clue. All I knew that I was spending more time at hospitals than actually in school.
So they didn't tell you what was going on?
Well, I couldn't really understand it. You know, I couldn't really sort of get my head around it. We didn't have the internet in those days, so you couldn't search online for, oh right, what is epilepsy? You know, you had to. The only way you could find out is for people to really sort of tell you if they understood it. So I collapsed, and I had a number of fits right from the age of 3 right up to, you know, 17, 18. And what was really interesting for me, but you tend to grow up quite quick when you've got, you know, especially when you're young, when you've got some sort of medical condition. And what was really sort of interesting for me was the fact that it was one of these things that enhanced the right side of my brain. Certainly the medication did, because in those days, in the, you know, it was a case of, well, you know, we'll try you on this medication and we'll see how it goes, and if it doesn't work, we'll put you on something totally different. And obviously these days it's more sophisticated how they treat, you know, and I don't think it's a condition. I think of it as more of a positive thing. I think it's a door opening. You know, the condition I think is a door opening to actually enhancing abilities and not, you know, controlling life or. So yeah, so it had a sort of an interesting effect on, you know, how I perceived the world really. And I went through various medications, had different sort of side effects. There was medications whereby I couldn't, you know, recognise what my parents. There was medications I was on whereby, you know, I'd look at a pattern and it would move.
From the medication?
Yeah, it was really sort of bizarre, really. And you know, my dad was you know, an illustrator and an artist, and he still is, and he still draws and paints and things. So he taught me to deal with it through art, really, through drawing and painting.
And how old were you when that happened? When he started doing that with you?
Well, I was about 3.5.
Okay.
And it was really quite cool because I remember, you know, in those days you could go to like a refuse, like a tip, like a dump, and you could climb over it and take things back, you know. So we didn't have a lot of money, so my dad didn't paint on canvases. He started off with oil painting, and so my sort of introduction to coming up with stuff was really through painting, really through art and oil painting.
Do you still paint?
Very, very rarely, but what I tend to do now is that I'll have an idea for something and I'll think about it, and then it'll take like 10-15 minutes to do it, and that'd be it, you know. So, and it's quite a cool way of working because I tend to get pretty bored quite easily.
Well, the sounds of it, if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and get loads of ideas, it's going to be difficult if you have to spend months and months on each one of those, because you want to kind of keep.
And you know what, you know, the biggest problem with coming up with ideas, especially for creative people, is that a lot of them don't really amount to anything. They're just sort of, you know, and the worst thing in the world, I think, is to have an idea and not document it in some sort of way, whether it's a sketch or whether it's a voice recording or words, whatever it is, because there's never, you know, I always think that there's many different ways to record an idea and to sort of, you know, monitor it, sort of thing, and you don't sort of limit yourself to that.
So do you keep a journal then? Or
Yeah,
how do
yeah. Well, I mean, this is, you know, one of my.
Let's have a look.
It's you know, there's all sorts of things in there, but it's just like all sorts of rubbish, really. But it's thoughts, it's ideas for things, and you know, there's nothing really there that's sort of any good, if you know what I mean. It's just
you
sort of.
don't know that though, and you may.
You know, I think it's one of these things whereby, you know, just sort of. I have to record it, and this book goes with me everywhere. If I lost it, I'd be pretty upset. But you know, I also do, you know, record things on, you know, the iPad and, you know, and draw on there and stuff like that as well. So it's whatever's to hand, really. And you know, it's, you know, they're, you know, I love the paper of Moleskines as well. You know, there's some fantastic brand stuff, but you know, expensive books, but very, very good quality. But going back to, you know, so I started painting, and then I went through a phase. I was on one particular medication whereby I went through almost a year of just painting in purple, and it was watercolours at that time.
Oh, interesting.
Went through watercolours, and then I got into acrylics, and then sort of towards my teenage years, I was doing into cartoons, and I was painting models, and I was always making something. You know, I was never ever bored, and you know, and it was all sorts of things. Making, you know, I made a toolbox. You know, it was a pretty poor piece of design, but it sort of did its thing.
How old were you when you made your toolbox?
Oh, about 11 years old. That was,
wow.
yeah. About
That's
10,
very. What's the word? It's very resourceful in a way, if you think about it. An 11-year-old needed a toolbox, and so you made it.
Yeah,
Nice.
You know, designed it and made it, and you know, it was made out of, you know, offcuts of wood, and the thing was heavy. It was, you know, it was just totally, you know, it was an awful piece of design.
You were 11 years old though.
So, but I'm my worst enemy. That's the, you know,
Yeah.
I always strive for perfection. I've always been like that.
I think
really.
a lot of creators are, in a sense, they're very hard on themselves.
Yeah.
Beat themselves up a lot, but actually for anybody looking in at the work, it's just a work of genius and a work of inspiration.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. In a way, if you look at the finished product and you think you did it as a work of inspiration. It came through an inspired thought, idea,
Yeah.
and you've manifested it. And then the ego kicks in when you actually step back and you go, right, how does that look? How's everybody going to receive what I've done? Your ego kicks in, and that's can be very, very defeating, because it can talk you down instead of just stopping at that work of inspiration and allowing it to be, and realizing that that inspiration is probably going to inspire others, and it serves a purpose. And you did mention purpose.
Yeah, purpose is incredibly important. There's got to be there's no point creating something, to me, for the sake of it. Just to, there's got to be a sort of reason for things to exist, because then, it achieves something.
But isn't the feeling that a creator gets whilst they're creating, is that not purpose enough? Is that if you're feeling down or you're feeling stuck or whatever, and you engage in that creative process, you're alive, you're in that energy of creativity. That in itself, for me anyway, is a hugely valuable purpose.
Yeah, that is a purpose, and initially, you get that. So it's almost like a drug. You get addicted to that. Whereby, you're on this journey of working on this particular project or developing this particular idea that, you don't know where it's going to go. You're in this situation whereby, you're almost like an explorer. You're an intellectual explorer. You're sort of thinking about, okay, this could go in all sorts of different directions and tangents and do stuff like that, and and there's no right or wrong. There's no real right or wrong to any sort of idea. It's just that whether it sort of, it just really sort of works. And obviously, if you're designing or creating a product, then you've got obviously technical limitations, which can sort of dictate the form of an idea.
Do you design products?
Not normally, but I've sort of dabbled in that area really, and it's something that I actually think of all design as almost like a product anyway. Whether it's a piece of art or whether it's a piece of design, whatever it is, whether it's a brochure, a website, or even a piece of music, it's almost like there's a sort of thing to it.
So
that's
the
a
product is the end thing.
Yeah, it's the achievement. The product is the achievement of, coming up with a concept that.
Or the manifestation of it, isn't it? It's it's the form of it.
But I see it more than the physical form. I see it more of the, the physical form and the idea working together, and really sort of.
The manifestation of an idea is probably the product of it, isn't it?
Well, it could be. I mean, if you take dance, for example, right, or any sort of performance art, the product to me isn't necessarily the dance or the people doing it. The sort of it's almost like the delivery of how the audience feels when you make them, smile or laugh, and that to me is almost like the sort of product. It's not.
The worry for me then, if the audience is the purpose or the product,
well, it's a
is
sort
that
of
then
result
do you
of
not
it.
set yourself up for some level of disappointment? Because remember, the creative journey is full of highs and a lot of lows, and most of the creative people that I am very blessed to have in my life and to meet in the role the job that I do, they find themselves in more low times than the highs. And I think a lot of it comes from feeling disappointed at other people's reactions to their ideas. So I think it's a bit of a dangerous kind of end point to have, rather than the manifestation of the idea. So if you are, let's go back to the dance example, right? So I used to do dance to a degree, not anything majorly professional, but I used to love Eye of a Tiger. So as a kid, I used to make up these dances and force people to watch it. It was embarrassing, actually. But to Eye of a Tiger, and I would just flow with the dance. And yes, the audience smiled and they clapped and everything. But if they just sat there staring, which sometimes they probably did, I never noticed. And okay, I was a kid. They probably did clap just to please me. But I was alive in the dance. So for me, that product was the physical dance. If I've created an audio program. My product is the audio program, is the recordings that I've created. our producer is a musician. His product is the music he's created. Unfortunately, when it becomes about other people's reception of that, that comes with ego and disappointments and so on. So I think that I love the way that you explain it, but having that as your end result can be a very dangerous place to go with it.
I think that's the excitement of it. You know, the fact that you can come up with something and there is a sort of an expectation for what it is, but you know, you never know whether people are going to love it or whether they're not going to like it at all. And you know, and it's never right and it's never wrong. You know, and you know, if you look at a comedian, generally they're quite miserable sort of people, really. You know, but when they go on stage, they transform into this amazing sort of performer. You know, and they come alive, and really that's what I'm trying to say is the audience, if in any sort of performance, you know, and performance to me isn't just like, you know, dance music, etc. It's, you know, I think we're all putting design is almost like sort of like and creativity is almost like a performance. It's you know, you're performing, but you know, internally, if you know what I mean, to create this thing.
I mean, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because you are creating for people to appreciate what you've done, because you're manifesting it for the world, obviously.
Yeah.
But I worry that there are so many creative people out there that never get started because they have the fear that nobody will accept what they're working on. So rather than engaging in that inspirational idea, they're so busy worrying about what people will see or perceive it or how they'll look at it, that they don't ever get going. And that's a real shame.
I think there's two things there. One, if we go back to the design project I did when for that the branding project I did for that agency when I was 11 years old. You know, they loved the work, they didn't pay me, right? And my dad said to me, "What are you going to do about this?" And he said to me, "You're not going to go around there with your mates and do something nasty." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that, Dad." He said, "Well, go away and have a think about it." So I had a thought about it. I came back and I said to my dad, "What I'm going to do is I'm going to give them, they can have what I've done, and I'm not really going to stress out about that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend the next month or so coming up with something even better, and they're not going to get it." And what was interesting about that, right, was that it was like a switch flicking from off to on. It was a totally subconscious switch. And it made me realise exactly what I was about. And I think going back to what you were saying, creative people, you know, it doesn't matter what you do, you've got to find your switch to what sort of really sort of inspires you and what sort of really sort of gets you sort of going. And there are challenges, especially in the current climate. You know, technology is dictating a lot of things. You know, it's de-skilling, you know, a lot of industries, you know, and it's devaluing a lot of craft and a lot of expertise, and we have to work with that. You know, when I was at art college, I left school with one qualification, which was A-level art. Surprise, surprise. And
I was going to ask you about that, actually. I was going to say, with all of that, did you study art? And you had to A-level?
You know, it was interesting because of the medical condition. You know, I was actually sort of banned from certain areas of the schools.
Yeah.
You know, because and it was the creative areas. It was the woodworking. It was the metalworking rooms, because it was too dangerous for me. So, in fact, one occasion I actually collapsed in the metalworking room, so I ended up in hospital. And so I was banned from those sort of areas in secondary school. And so what I was doing is that I was sort of spending a lot of time in the staff room, and they said, "Just do what you want to do." So I just drew, and I just painted, and I just wrote, and all sorts of things, really, whatever I thought.
So you wrote as well?
Yeah, grammatically I'm awful at writing. You know, and I am in the process of doing a book called The Creative Curse.
What is the Creative Curse?
Yeah.
I've got so many questions because I want to know what this 11-year-old product was that you did, that concept. I want to know more about that, because you haven't said what it is, if you're allowed to. So I bet you our viewers are wondering, and I want to know about the Creative Curse as well.
Well, you know, at the end of the day, you know, if we go back to the 11-year-old, you know, the product of what that was, you know, it was a design project for this company, and it was for one of their clients in the States. in America.
An 11-year-old was asked to design what and how? How did they find you?
Well, I mean, it was just really through connections. Really, it was through I was always drawing and sketching and painting and stuff like that, and people were looking, were seeing the work. My parents were showing it to people and things like that, and eventually, the right people sort of saw it. Well, sort of the right people.
Who goes to an 11-year-old? I mean, that's just amazing. More, please. I think that's what kids need nowadays, because if you're not academic, I've got 2 kids, neither are particularly academic, but one is exceptionally creative. And actually for kids who are not academic to get those opportunities quite young, I mean, that's a really amazingly young age.
Do you know what? It was harder in those days because we haven't got the internet and we haven't got all this social stuff going on. These days it's really easy. And you've got, millennials, the generation that are basically are natural with all this technology and social media and stuff. They're very much, there's a natural thing to them sharing what they do.
So sorry to backtrack. You got contacted as an 11-year-old and you designed, what was the product?
Well, it was basically coming up with some branding for a company. 11 years old, and I didn't know anything about positioning, or image, message, tone of voice, any of that sort of stuff going on, and it was rather sort of, it was a very sort of natural project really, because there was no real sort of intellect behind it.
Branding for what? For the company?
Well, yeah, it was for that company.
What did they do?
Well, it was a design company. They wanted me to brand the design company. So
they are a design company, and
do you know what? I get a lot of projects like that. Last year, worked with 8 companies, 8 creative companies, branding them up and doing various things with them.
So tell me about your book.
Yeah, the creative curse has been something that's been in my head for many years. Well, it almost like goes back to when I was born. But really, what it's about is the sort of the thinking behind the negativity and the positivity of creative thinking. Because I think that there's a parallel between sanity and madness, and creative people are treading that sort of fine line between sanity and insanity. And sometimes when you sort of look at, you have to look at insanity sometimes to be sane. It's really sort of weird. And I think that, every creative person, it doesn't matter their level of creativity and what they do, there's this sort of bit of them that's a bit sort of off the wall, a bit unusual. Like you say, whether it's an event that's changed their life, or whether it's something negative, and very much to what you said, about the negativity of things. The negativity is an incredibly inspiring thing, because what it does is it means that it inspires you to innovate. If you look at the recession, it's proven. You speak to any business expert and they'll say that the most innovative time in business is when there's a recession, because what it does is it makes people innovate, through need.
So negativity, or being in a bad space, or being in a dark kind of zone, in a way forces you to find a way through it and out of it, and that's where you can get some of your most creative ideas.
And I totally embrace negative emotions, because there's something that really sort of comes out of them that sort of keeps the fire of passion burning. I sailed through art college. It was incredibly simple for me. I got a distinction, and I remember doing a photograph, and I got a distinction for creating this photograph, and the photography tutor said to me, "How did you take that photograph?" And he was the expert in photography, and I said to him, "I don't know."
What was in it? What was it of?
What it was is it was a stone tower, and the way the photograph had been taken, I still can't even remember how I took it. it was a combination of all sorts of things. It was a combination of the light, the angle of the photograph, and and he showed it to a number of his peers, and they just couldn't really work it out, and I couldn't understand it really.
You just did it.
Yeah, it just sort of happened, and it
I
was.
feel like I'm talking to the clone of my child. I'm not.
Oh, right, really?
She's the female 15-year-old. She's exactly comes up with these amazing things, and then you go, "How did you do that?" I don't know. It just happens. But you see, for me, that's beautiful because that spark. I feel personally that inspiration comes from some kind of other divine, something otherworldly about it. The desire to be creative and the acceptance of it, and being open, and being in a dark space to a degree, where you have to pull yourself out. All of those things together.
Yeah.
Where did the ideas come from?
Well, do you know what? Every day I look at images. Right? I've got some images that are negative images, but they inspire me. Mm-hmm. There's and one of these photographs is it's a white person's hand, and the hand is on top of the hand is another hand, and it's a very thin hand of a child. Of an African child, so they're touching. And so it's a very supporting sort of image. And I look at that image and I think, really, that one image alone really says so much, in that what we should be doing as, regarding, we should be coming up with ideas that, that gets rid of famine. We should be focusing on the important stuff and not the stuff that we don't really need,
I have a question for you here, which I'm sure that a lot of viewers and a lot of creative people are grappling with, which is the needing to earn money. So you've got the ideas, you've got the inspiration, you've got the skill to bring those ideas to life, but we live in a society, in a world where we have to earn money. Firstly, do you earn money doing what you love?
Yes.
You do.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I wouldn't, to be honest, if I couldn't earn money at it, I wouldn't do it, because I promised myself when I left art college. I sat in the park in Croydon. I was on a park bench, and I was sitting there, and I was looking out to these trees, and I thought to myself, okay, what do I do now? Because you're at that transition. Right?
So my second question, sorry to jump in, but it's part of where you're going. I suspect is how do you earn then? So you made this commitment to yourself that you would earn money doing what you love?
Well, no, it was never a conscious decision.
Okay.
I never thought I want to earn money at what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. I from a very, very young age, I only wanted to create, right? Okay. And I only wanted to come up with ideas. I only wanted to design things. I never thought about money or anything like that at all. Mm-hmm. And it was never, ever a conscious decision. I never thought, okay, if I go to art college, I'll be able to do this, I'll be able to do that, I'll be able to work in these design companies, whatever it is. There was never any of that whatsoever. It was really it was a very sort of organic thing. And if we're sort of talking about inspiring young creatives and getting them, to me, for a start, art college should be about developing your creativity, not the commercial side of business. Yeah. But these days there is a lot of focus on that. The idea is everything. When it comes down to it, an employer, whether it's a design company, an ad agency, whatever it is after something unique, is after something special that they can offer their clients, right? Because that adds value for their brand, and obviously their clients love that. And they're always looking for things that are really unique and really different. And so my sort of thinking really with young people that want to get into the creative industry is really sort of try and think about what really defines you as different from everyone else, all the other creatives, and really sort of work on that, and use that as your sort of spearhead to getting a job or whatever you want to do. Don't necessarily focus on the money, because the money does come if you're really exceptional at what you do, and if you're not, try to be as exceptional as what you can do as much as possible. Be your own worst critic. If you're looking for a job, think about, say you're looking for a job in a design company, you've graduated from art college, think about what you can bring to that company that's unique that they're not offering, and package that in a way whereby they think, okay, that's really, really cool. We need to speak to this student or this graduate. We need to understand what they're about. Never really sort of compromise on the idea. There's been situations in my professional life where I've done that, and I end up very, very miserable because the potential of the thing hasn't been reached.
It's tricky though, because if you're doing it for a job and that's the work that you do, you are doing it for somebody else.
Yeah.
Often somebody else's idea, and you're the creative person trying to give an edge to that, but it's not entirely your own to just own, is it?
Well, the intellectual property is owned by the studio, because by the company, because they're paying you a salary. So legally.
They also pass or fail, not pass or fail. I mean, but they would sign something off, or keep making you bash away at it, and it can be very, very disheartening. Well, if you want to just be free flowing, how does a free flowing creative earn money?
You have to understand the commercial restraints, right? You have to. And this is the negative side of this industry, of any creative business, is the fact, bottom line is, you're going to run out of time. You're going to run out of money to work on the project, and you've then got to draw a line in the sand, and you've got to say, well, okay, that's really it for that, So, it's hard. It's very, very hard because, I work on projects and I always go further with them than what's in the budget, and that's because I want to see where this stuff is going to go.
So you over-deliver, but it's because you also don't stop yourself because of the restrictions.
Yeah.
And I think that comes back to what you said about the negativity can actually be a really positive thing, or often is, or usually is.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe a new way of looking at that, the restrictions of working for somebody else and having to create, having to earn the money, and that struggle, which feels negative, could be a very positive thing for the creative person in that situation, based on what you were saying before.
Well, what it is, it's mindset. You've got to think negativity is positivity, and positivity is positivity. So
win-win.
That's right.
Nice.
And really, it all comes from inside the person. I believe that it doesn't matter what you create, whether it's a piece of art or a sculpture or a piece of music, whatever it is. There's an essence in it. There's a piece of your soul that goes in it. It doesn't matter what it is. It can be the most commercial thing on the planet, but there is still an essence in it. There's
of you.
Yeah, and that's very much the attitude of a creator. If you know what I mean. I wake up every day and I feel so cool. Feel so really cool about it because. It's almost like you're giving birth to something. So every day you're witnessing a birth, or you're creating a life. And it's not a physical life, but it could be anything. It's a piece of art, whatever it is, a piece of design. And that is, when you think of things like that, you sort of get the sort of, you think things in a different sort of way.
I was going to say, if you start a creative project with that mindset, that actually I'm giving birth to something and it's got my essence in it, and you bring in that, what you said earlier about purpose and maybe a bit of intention, then the expectation of what others will think may not be as damaging or as big a deal. In a way, it means that yes, you're doing it for people to enjoy, but if you're also putting it as part of your own essence and your own purpose and your own intention, it's full of beauty and positivity, even if it's a negative piece. It's a piece of you. And that's quite a beautiful process.
Yeah, and it's, I remember years and years ago, working in, design companies. I went through the whole mill, I worked in, some of them are sweatshops, some of them are, horrendous places to work in, and I saw a lot of very, very creative people get burnt out, which is the nature of some companies in the industry, but they churn you out, they spit you out at the other end.
The minute you stop producing these ideas and you get a bit stayed. What's the best kind of role or job that you've had in all your career?
Well, to me, it's all about the purity of the idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I mean, this is probably one of the things I loved actually really creating. I mean, it's a tiny little thing, but it's an absolute sort of precision piece of engineering when you think about it. The amount of effort that went into this was quite staggering, really.
I'm a bit embarrassed. What is that?
It's actually a promotional piece for a photographer, and really it's about telling...
So is this somebody's business card?
Yeah, it's actually a business card, but I don't really think of it as a business
Wow,
card.
I'm going to have to open it for camera. Right, let's do it this way, the correct way. So that's the front of the business card. And then you open it up. Look at that. And there's some very different photos in there that show a lot of diverse skill. Look at that. And then that's the back of it. And on here it says location, fashion and portraiture. And you've got the person's contact. That's very clever.
I mean, what's interesting about that piece, right, is that it's a tiny little thing.
So that's your camera lens. Sorry, is that meant to look like a camera lens there?
Yeah,
like the
but without the sort of the body of the camera. But what was interesting about this, right, is that when I presented the concepts to the client, he totally got it. He totally understood what it was about, and he actually said that. He actually asked some quite interesting questions. Why was there no social media channels on it? All this sort of stuff. And I said to him, think about it. What I want you to do is actually, we want people, your target market, to sort of engage with you, online and see more of your work before engaging with you on social stuff. There was some obvious things like why isn't there a landline number on it? And I said to him, think about it. You're a location-based fashion photographer. Why do you need a landline on it? And it all goes back to the sort of the purity of an idea, and that is that what is needed, what isn't. And if it isn't necessary, it shouldn't really be there anyway. It shouldn't really sort of, And
sorry, was this your best?
Well, the only reason why I think it's one of the most interesting projects is because the whole project was a joy to work on. It was one of these things whereby there wasn't too much interference from the client, and it was one of these things whereby it really sort of came to the right conclusion. Now whether it's an ad campaign or whatever it is, I've done all sorts of things. Somewhere down the line, almost like the idea becomes corrupt, or it becomes, it sort of dilutes, and it's very, very important throughout the creative process to be true to what you're trying to achieve and the vision for what the what the
What
client
are you
needs.
trying to achieve? What is your purpose, if you will? What is your creative packaging, or I don't know how to ask you the question. I mean, what are you about? What do you do?
Do you know, I'm just about me. At the end of the day, that's all I'm about, really. I'm a very genuine sort of person. I believe in the honesty of an idea, and I think that it's something that you sort of get to a point in your career and you just sort of think, really, just do stuff that you enjoy doing. Don't, I'm not into convention. If everyone's going in that direction, I'll go the complete opposite.
Yeah.
That's the way I've always sort of thought. And, convention is boring.
I mean, I have to say,
it really is boring.
I looked at your website. It's the creativetimetraveller.com, is it?
Well, no, actually, the URL's changing, but
okay. Do you want to tell us what it is?
yeah, it's actually peteburrows.me. I'm gonna, but there's an interesting thing about that is that the site is, there's very much sort of stuff on it that is incredibly personal.
Well, I like that. That's why I was mentioning it. Is that
Yeah.
actually it really gives an insight into
Yeah.
your creative journey, and I
Yeah.
suppose for people who are looking for somebody to brand their business and to come up with ideas to help them present themselves to potential clients and customers. I think it's a great way for people to see who they're buying into and who they're getting on board. It's a really clever.
Do you know what? I think, well, there's one thing there. I mean, I hate this word. I hate this word brand because it's too restrictive. But having said that, I create brands, but that isn't all what I do. I think really it's about, what I'm more about is the idea really, and it could be anything. It's applying a creative intellect to solving a problem, and it could be literally anything. I mean, I've worked on projects whereby there's been no design at all. It's purely about solving a problem.
How would people know to come to you if they need what you're offering? I mean, how do you tell them what you do then? Because an idea is huge.
Yeah,
it could be in anything, anywhere. So if somebody wanted to find you or to work with you, how would they know that they need you if you're not a bit more defined?
Well, the thing is, it's about, they've got to have a need. They've got to have a need for an idea. And if it's a business, they've got to have identified a problem.
So somebody would find Pete Burrows if they need an idea to do something or to change something.
Yeah, or if they want to achieve something. I mean, this is really the crux of it. It's very, very simple with businesses because every business has got a problem. And really it's a case of identifying what that problem is and come up with an idea to solve that problem or that challenge.
Do you know what? I've just had the most amazing epiphany within myself. I don't know if
Carol,
I was sitting here getting all excited. Why? Is because I'm trying to define you and to not put you in a box as such, but it's just good for concept and for ideas for me to be able to understand. And I'm quite a broad thinker, so I could define you and I could also think beyond that. But I like to help other people to understand. That's the educator in me. And I realised this. I've had sitting here in the studio with me comedians, comedy scriptwriters, authors, speakers, artists, musicians. I've had a whole host of very specific creatives. And I think what I've been trying to get my head around here, and it's just hit me, you are the seed of creativity in a sense because you are the idea and whatever that involves. Wow.
That's pretty cool, isn't it?
There you go. I love it. I want to be that. We've actually come to the end of the show. I cannot believe it has flown by. It's been an absolute delight to have you here, to share a little bit in your vision of creativity, and also to understand how you work. And I think, and I hope that a lot of our viewers will be really inspired by that. And those of them that are stuck in a bit of a dark space can use some of the tips that you've given them.
Yeah,
to really pull through.
They can contact me. I don't mind helping with that. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
You've been watching another episode of the Creative Heart Show. Thank you to Pete Burrows for joining me today. And don't forget to tune in to the next episode next week. Take care.